In this video, we'll learn to open and save embroidery designs using the Sketch-a-Stitch program. And so if you've sketched something that you are in love with and ready to embroider, and so you've got all your elements created and it's time to stitch it out, then you're going to choose File and Save or Save As. The difference here is Save will save it with the same name as the last time you saved it, and Save As gives you the ability to give something a new name each time you save. So the first time you choose Save, it's the same as Save As because you're asked to give it a name. And so, you could save this design as design number 1, Floriani WAF format, and I'll just save it on my desktop. Now, obviously, your machine does not say or open that WAF file, and so even though we've saved this as that WAF file, we still need to make a file that we could stitch out. And so in that case, you would choose File and Save As, and now you could point this at like your USB drive. Maybe you've got a thumb drive that you want to save your design onto, and then you can choose the format that your machine takes from the files of type list. And there's many different formats, from long arm stitch formats to all the popular sort of home embroidery formats and even the commercial formats. And so whatever format you choose, you select it. And now you can change the name to be whatever name you want it to be and choose Save. And so this is how it works. Now, the difference between the WAF and the, for example, PES format. So PES and JEF and VIP and all of these different machine formats are really based on stitches. But as you've been learning here with the Sketch-a-Stitch software, we actually create shapes, and those shapes have instructions like the style of underlay or the style of fill and the pattern of the fill or the density of the fill or the stitch direction. And all of those things are very easily edited in the original form of the data, which is saved as the WAF. And so the point to learn here is you always save a WAF file so that if you want to make edits, you can come back to your WAF file. Yes, you'll still save some kind of a machine file, but truth be known, you don't need to save those machine formats. In other words, it's completely logical to have a folder with all of your designs that you've sketched in the Floriani format and then simply make machine formats as you need them. And I'm not saying it's wrong to save and collect them in the different machine formats. I'm just saying you can always make them with the Floriani WAF file. Now, with all of that said, let's talk about opening designs. Because when I choose Open, I can open all of the same formats that I can save to. And so when I choose to open, and I've got a design of a little bunny rabbit in the PES format, and when I choose to select it, it does show me a small picture in the preview window. And there's a very important checkbox here that comes in unchecked by default. And you have the option of checking it. And I want to discuss what that's all about. And so I'm going to leave it unchecked for now and say Open. Now the design comes onto your screen, and you can do all of the things that you could do with any design. For example, you could select the color in your design and change the color to another color. So these are things that you can easily select and change about your design. And you can use your slow redraw tool or sketch new elements to this design, etc., etc. If you use your select tool to select the design, you could change its size, bigger or smaller. And just to note that there's 14,500 stitches in the design, and when I make it larger, it's the same 14,500 stitches. And so what really happens is when you open a design in a stitch format like PES, the software, and you don't check off that magic checkbox, the software simply brings in the colors of the design as what we kind of call a raw stitch data, just the basic stitches. And although you can change their color or you can resize them, when you do resize them, it will simply scale those original stitches bigger or smaller, further apart or closer together. And so if I was to choose Open again, and this time choose the Convert to Outlines checkbox, now the software reads those stitches. It takes a little bit longer to open. Not too much, but a little bit. And it has now, if I look at these colors, created shapes. It's understood the difference between the run stitches and the fill stitches and created shapes, which you can now go in and interact with if you choose to. But I think probably most popularly is now you can select your design, increase its size, and the software will generate new stitches. And so notice now that the design has got, the stitch count has gone up to 16,800 stitches. And that is because when the software read the original stitches, it recognized certain shapes. And when it recognized a shape, it read the distance between the stitches as a density amount. And so when you make it bigger, it makes new stitches and maintains the original stitch spacing. And so that's kind of one of the magic things about the software is you have the ability to make size changes to your designs as well as add new elements to them. And it's certainly not fully equal to the Floriani FTCU software where, if you watch videos about FTCU, you'll learn that we have a lot of editing capabilities when it really comes down to editing your existing designs. But the Sketch-A-Stitch gives us the basic fundamental component, which is that ability to convert stitches into objects. And so that's an important part to learn about as well. A lot of times I just open up designs and leave them as stitches and sketch a little stuff around them. And if you're just making small size changes, 10% is certainly not normally any issue at all, bigger or smaller. And it's almost better to not have the software making new stitches because, as much as it can do a great job, it can also kind of make some stitches that look different or funnier than the original ones. And so unless you're making drastic size changes, a lot of times I just simply leave that checkbox set to off, which is why it is by default turned off. This convert to outlines is by default turned off. That way when you turn it on that you've purposely turned it on and that you're allowing the software to do this sort of extra step of taking your embroidery design, making it an editable embroidery design so that you can resize it. Anyway, that was an interesting video about opening and saving designs using Sketch-A-Stitch.